How we doing, guys? Welcome back to the Frugal Homestead. So today we're outside, still kind of early in the morning, a little overcast. We're going to check out the garden some. Now I want to talk about gardens some because depending upon where you live, no one gardening method works for everything. It just doesn't. You have to find what works for you and what works for your property, your homestead, your farm, whatever you've got. Even if it's a back, this video may give you some information that'll help you, but it may only work for like you planting in pots in your backyard. And that's fine. Find what works for you. Don't let anyone tell you need to do it this way or that way. That said, we found what we needed to get going here. On our property here in the Hocking Hills, the glaciers have come through and just tore all our topsoil off. Plus, we live on top of a hill. Around here, it's a large hill. It's like the third largest lived on hill in all of Hocking County. So we have a lot of runoff, which takes a lot of our topsoil away. People don't realize it, but basically the tops of these balds are just very desolate. Very hard ground, very clayey, not real good quality for growing. There's tilling, there's disking, there's things you can do. But we wanted to go to a method where we didn't have to really till. We liked some no-till kind of style. We wanted it to be all organic, truly organic, not just certified organic because somebody came in and didn't see no chemicals. I mean, we wanted something to where it could feed our animals, feed ourselves, feed our kids at the time we started all this. And it wasn't a lot of maintenance because we have another channel which is an outdoors channel. We go out and do a lot of things. We go hiking, we go backpacking, we go camping, kayaking, canoeing. We like to go out and do things. So we needed that perfect balance of being low maintenance and produce well and be truly organic. I believe we found that with the Back to Eden method of gardening. Now, it's called a million different things. Some call it deep mulch. Some people call it just standard mulching. But basically, I like the explanation of the Back to Eden method because his classification for looking at it was go out in nature. What does nature do? Nature, leaves drop. They cover the ground, which softens the ground, which allows moisture to stay in, which is at a premium in some spots, and allows basically to keep a lot of the undergrowth down to maximize the tree growth. And I thought to myself, that's exactly what I want. That's exactly how I want to do it. So basically on our property we've had 3 gardens. We now have downsized to 2 now that the kids have moved out. But we also have lots of fruit trees, berry patches, grapes. We have a lot of things, and all of them we do in this same method. So come along with me, we'll explain it all to you and how we do it, and I'll also be able to show you a comparison of what the normal soil here looks like and what this stuff looks like. Alright, the first component is some kind of mulch. Now you can use leaves, you can use a underdone compost, you can use pine needles, you can use wood chips. I do not suggest sawdust. It does work, but it almost forms a crust sometimes. So, as you can see here, we have a pile of basically wood chips, pine needles, leaves that have been ground up. This is off of a truck from a tree service. They come and dump them here every once in a while, and then we use them in the garden. Generally, I will kind of roll this pile around, but I don't usually put fresh mulch on until fall. The reason being is this stuff can sometimes start composting and get hot. That's not good for plants. So generally speaking, I just put a fresh batch over every fall to allow for it to cool throughout the winter and start holding moisture, while the stuff under it in the garden that has been there from previous years is getting composted up, becoming soil, and the worms are eating through it. All right, it's important for you guys to understand before we look at the garden what our ground looked like here before we did this. It's a hard crust clay, completely dry and devoid of moisture. Mind you, it rained this morning. Look at that, look how dry that is. That is not going to support life very well. You can till it, but it's not going to, the water is going to still run right off because the soil is not going to hold it. Let's go check out the garden. All right, now we're in the garden, and I just want to show you guys what the earth looks like here. So if you dig down, it's kind of a mix of like a mulch, dirt, so it softened it all around. Very composty. It's got moisture, you can squeeze it and it'll pack. And you see I'm just digging this out with my hands. That ground over there, I was chipping away at it. This has never been tilled since the very first time we put this plot in. We tilled it and added some rabbit poop and tilled the rabbit poop in, covered it with chips and have left it alone. This is what you get 3 years later. But what I want to show you is that's a taproot for a weed. We walk through and weed these about every month. That's it. But I just sucked out that whole taproot from that weed. That's how weeds come back. They break off the taproot because the ground's too hard. But think about how fast you're gonna weed your garden and they ain't gonna come back if you can sit here and just pull the taproots out. So when we do weed this, very few come back, and the weeds when they come out are very easy to pull. I mean, you saw just yanking them out. We actually have had our 3-year-old granddaughter here helping us, and she just yanks them out. Granted, you gotta watch you don't pull the plants out. But over here we have a volunteer Roma tomato just came up. Now we rotate our crops between our 2 gardens. Used to be our 3, used to be a circle, but we rotate them, trying to not overly kill the soil in one area. You guys may not have the ability to do that, so you might be able to just rotate from side to side of the garden. Just kind of depends. But this side here is cucumbers on this trellis. At this time of year though, I don't know if you guys can see where they're chewed off. I don't put stuff up to try and stop wildlife from eating our food. We plant enough to let them take their share, be it the deer, be it whatever. Let them have their piece. I plant enough that we can have ours and they can have theirs. And it just kind of completes the cycle because we are hunters as well. Now, there's a couple rows of cucumbers down this way and a couple rows of beans this way. I mean, just to put it in perspective. Now, fertilization in this garden. Generally, I was speaking, I told you guys we put our chips down in the fall when the crops are done. That is also when I fertilize, because I'll put my fertilizer down, then I put my chips on top. Generally for fertilizer, I either use blood meal and bone meal. That's if I'm having a real bad garden. You know, if I've got a real bad year in the garden, I'll powder out some blood meal and bone meal in the garden. If it's a pretty good year, what I do is I either find somebody that's got rabbits, because we don't raise them anymore, or cows, or my third choice down, which is usually what people have a lot of, is horse poop. Any of those three poops, I lay it out on tarp, let it dry out, pulverize it as much as possible with some gloves on, or a tamp of some kind, and then we just lightly sprinkle that powder on the garden, cover it with chips, and leave it for the year. So in other words, until next spring, I'm not touching it. Now, we have introduced red wiggler worms in these gardens to help process the ground. You can actually buy them through the mail. Just a standardized worm, but because the ground's so hard here, it's almost devoid of worms. So that's one of the reasons why it's hard to turn this ground into gardens. But by doing these few little things, it has turned this ground into usable soil that obviously produces quite well. I mean, we're extremely happy with our results. And the same results can be found with multiple things. We have berries all over this place that we've planted. We have a huge patch of blackberries. We have a huge patch of raspberries. We've got a small patch of strawberries, the smaller ones. And all of those do quite well. Now, to amend berries that like a little more acidic soil, we add a little bit of coffee grounds in the fall to our mix. So there's just little tweaks here and there, but standardized, this works well for most crops. Now, obviously, you can't do this on a large scale. That's not realistic. But on a homestead or a garden style scale, this is about as good as it gets. And like I said, it's mentioned under a bunch of names. Deep mulch, garden mulching. Some people even do a variant where they're actually growing in hay bales. You can use straw. Straw makes a decent bedding to cover the ground. We're just trying to keep that moisture in the ground and facilitate growth of life in the soil. The more life you have in your soil, the more the soil is going to take care of itself, rather than you needing to add chemicals to it to make it work every year. So this is just a quick peek at how we garden and the things we do. We'll be going more in depth on this subject as it goes on. Right now, like you see, we're just picking the finals here, going to clean everything up, gotta go through and weed it all, and then we'll come back and show you how we pre-treat in the fall and remulch. So until next time, I'm Tony. Please like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video.